On. We're excited to be talking about compliance today and where the market is going. And we have some amazing panelists here to bring some different insights. We're just going to take a moment. So I'm going to just talk for a moment kind of randomly as people are just joining us. We're expecting a heavy turnout today. We had quite a few people sign up for the webinar, and we're excited to share some really good insights. I really am hoping everyone walks away with something that they said, wow, that really made a difference for me. And not just how you're looking at the market, but how you approach the market when you're looking for something new. So I guess all this said, we'll get it started here. So today is where the profession is today from compliance careers and where it's headed tomorrow. Something that we were just commenting that we'd love to know what tomorrow looks like in this marketplace. Right now, we're quite strong. Anyway, we'll go forward from here. So this is one of our Barker Gilmore GC Advantage from a complementary standpoint. We're always out looking to help lawyers, in-house counsel, and compliance officers become better strategic partners, and that's what this is all about. Visit our GC Advantage on our website. We have past webinars and future webinars. Upcoming next, a very hot topic, general counsel compensation. What's fair, what's changed, and the strategies for effective negotiation. One of the things we constantly are hearing from our clients, the CEO or CHROs, what should we be paying our general counsel? I always am now reluctant to throw out a number because every time I throw out a number, they say, well, that's higher than we're looking to pay. I tell them, you get what you pay for. So anyway, it should be a really great conversation. We do encourage questions. That said, we had a record of 36 questions asked before the webinar, so Matt's going to try to get us through a lot of these questions. But if you have any questions, feel free to scroll down, ask a question. We'll try to get to it. If we don't get to it during the website, our marketing organization is very quick to try to pull together a white paper that answers some of these questions. So even if we don't get to it today, don't be disappointed. We will get to the material. And all this said, we have an amazing featured speaker, Matt Kelly. I'm going to let Matt introduce the others on the panel today. But really appreciate Matt joining our company, brings a lot of credibility to the webinar today. Matt was a former editor and publisher of Compliance Week, and today is the editor and CEO of Radical Compliance. So what I love about Matt is he has it from all angles, whether it's academia, from industry, from government. So he really has full 360 perspective on compliance. So he's a great resource for people to reach out to. All that said, welcome, relax. We have 90 minutes ahead of us, and Matt, I'll lay it out to you.
Well, thank you very much, John, and I appreciate everybody who is joining us here today. Thank you very much. As John said, we are here to talk about the current and future state of compliance as a profession. And so I, as editor of Radical Compliance, that's just a weekly newsletter I put out. I write about the career security issues for compliance professionals quite a lot. And then I wound up striking up a conversation with Barker Gilmore about what the state of the market looks like these days. Wouldn't it be cool to have a webinar to discuss that market and how you listeners can position yourselves for good career success? And that's what brought us all here today. Very briefly, I will go through the big points that we want to talk about. We have, as John said, we're going to go for 90 minutes or so, and we're going to carve that up into a couple of big chunks. Chunk number one is just what the overall state of the market is right now. Is there a lot of hiring activity? Is there not? What sort of hiring activity? What are we seeing for compensation trends? I dug up some numbers from the federal government on projection for future growth of compliance and compliance-related fields. Number two, we wanted to talk about what are some of the skills that a compliance officer should have, or the technical expertise. What's the balance between the two, including the eternal question of, do you really need to be a lawyer to be a successful compliance officer or not? And then number three, aside from the skills, what are the good experiences you should have in your career for good long-term career success? What would you want to do in the early part of your career? What about in the later part of your career? How's that different? And how do you avoid any career mistakes that might put your path on a bit of a dead end? And how would you get out of that if you find yourself going in the wrong direction? Kind of questions like that. And then, as John said, we already have a lot of questions. We would love to have more. So, as listeners want to ask questions, by all means, just submit them in the Q&A feature of Zoom, and we can work those in. We'll save up some dedicated time at the end, but if you ask a really good question, I might just spring it on our speakers all at once. That said, our other two speakers here, in addition to John, also are veteran compliance professionals. First is Heidi Ollinger. Heidi is these days a senior advisor with Barker Gilmore and previously had been the head of compliance at McDonald's for many years. So Heidi, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And also joining us is Ellen Hunt, who these days is a senior advisor at Spark Compliance, which is part of the Diligent compliance software empire. But Ellen, in her former days, had also been head of compliance and audit at the AARP and head of compliance at Blue Cross Blue Shield in Illinois. She's got a lot of healthcare experience. So Ellen also is another one who has seen the ups and downs of what this profession looks like. Ellen, great to have you here too.
Thank you, Matt. Thrilled to be here.
All right. So, John, I'm going to put it back to you first, just to give us an overall sense of how the market is right now. Are we seeing a lot of hiring activity compared to in the past? Do you think it's going to be stable? Do we know what's going on? And while you're doing that, I'll see if I can pull up a slide of some job projections. But just in brief, John, what do you think?
Well, it has been an interesting pattern between November, December, and then the new year and getting to where we are here in April. At the election time, things slowed down. I think there was a lot of uncertainty what was going to happen. After the election, all of a sudden, a large number of searches came in. I went through our books today to see where did these searches come from and how many we actually booked. I was surprised to see we closed 11 CCOs in the first quarter. That's a big deal for us. We're a boutique firm. That's a number. I went through it, anything from technology company, financial services, healthcare, a chemical company, and 2 PE sponsors looking for a head of compliance for their company. So it's spread pretty thin. Where is it going? I say we've never been busier. And if you ask me what my crystal ball looks like for past summer, I have no idea. And that's the consensus I'm seeing in industry. You watch these markets going up and down, people being concerned with international. The good news for anyone sitting in the seat or aspiring to the seat, the company needs a chief compliance officer. Same thing on the general counsel side. I was just talking to someone. We just placed a general counsel at a Fortune 500. They did not have an employment agreement, and he was concerned about that. I said, here's your safety net. They can't exist without the general counsel. Same thing with the CCO. So I see compliance has really taken a real strong hold in members of the executive leadership team, and the companies respect compliance more than I've ever seen them respect compliance. So I would just say the trend is we expect a busy year in compliance.
Can you give any other color on, say, specific industries right now? I know healthcare, financial services, they're both highly regulated. On the other hand, there's a lot of other industries where probably those folks would say, I don't feel lightly regulated on my end. But what do you see out there for different industries?
So the industries can be very specific and a little bit narrow-minded in what they're looking for. I would say we're always going to see in the highly regulated industry like financial services, the bulk of our placements were in financial services in the first quarter. And then number 2 was healthcare because of that regulatory. That said, any publicly traded company, the tech company had an SEC compliance issue. The chemical company was looking for someone that was a better strategic partner and more of a business-minded professional that could help them achieve their goals while achieving a strong compliance program. So, I mean, there's all different angles. I say, unfortunately, I can't stereotype it. It's always going to be a nice mix, a nice blend of what's hot and what, where the compliance opportunities are coming from.
Okay. So before we go any further, I will ask the logistics people behind the scenes if you could push out one of our polling questions, because we do have polling questions for the audience. But polling question number one, if we could put that up, is just for all of the listeners. What is your sense of how the compliance job market feels these days? And does it feel, as you can see there on your screen, does it feel the same that it's fine? Does it feel the same that it's terrible? Are you more positive than you were last summer, or are you more negative? And we will see if we can get the results of that up in 30 or 60 seconds or so. One point I wanted to talk about while this particular slide is up on everybody's screen is this shows some growth over the next 10 years or so for various compliance professions. But the thing that gets me is we actually don't really have a sense of how big the compliance market is, because there are going to be plenty of people in these roles up on this screen who are never going to be compliance professionals. Accountants and auditors, yes, there's going to be a lot of growth there. My accountant doing my taxes this week is not a compliance professional, but they're lumped in there. But I know plenty of auditors who have moved into being a senior compliance person. I know lots of law firm lawyers who had been compliance officers. They went into a firm. I know people who worked at firms who've gone in-house and they're compliance officers. And it's hard to capture how big this field really is. There are going to be plenty of tech companies where the privacy officer or the IT security person, they're going to wind up doing compliance because that's where the risk is. So I talk about that a lot on my own newsletters, that we don't really have a good sense of any of this yet. That said, do we have the results of polling question number one? Can we push that out? I'd be curious to see them. More negative than you were 6 months ago. That's 28%. Half the people saying, okay, it's stable. And 16% who feel more positive. All right, we have that. That is what it is. We'll have some other polling questions later on in the hour and a half. John, the only other question I wanted to put to you before we also loop in Ellen and Haiti is just, what can you tell us about compensation? Let's talk about who's getting paid what, or are they getting bonuses or equity, or what does it look like?
Well, so we actually just did our a comp survey for compliance officers. The base salary for most of these executives, including general counsel, is only up a couple percentage, which is normal. What we were pretty happy to see last year, that 88% of them hit their target bonus. So that was pretty good. As far as comp goes, it's all over the map depending on the size of the team, the size of the company, the complexity of the company's regulatory landscape. It's all across the board. I would say it's hard to measure by a survey how much exactly should you be making. There's so many factors involved. If you're going to search for a job, understand the risks, understand the responsibilities, understand what the company is looking to do from a business standpoint, and understand what is it going to take to get there. So really is going to go out there. One other component, I was just talking about the marketplace. We did ask people if they're happy and looking for new opportunities. Good news is we saw that 44% are not considering new opportunities. That means pretty good job satisfaction. The good news for us is 56% said they are interested in considering other opportunities. So one of the trends I will tell you out there for all of these positions that we just filled, you talk about these 11 positions, highly competitive. I think we're going to talk later about what it takes to get to the finish line, but there's a lot of competition out there. If you're not on your A game, you're not getting to the finish line.
All right. We will, as you said, talk about what the A game is and how you get there. We'll talk about that later on. But Ellen and Haiti, I wanted to ask you both for your takes on this too. I guess maybe I'll start with Ellen and then Haiti. Give me your take on your sense of the overall health of the compliance profession, or the need for the compliance profession. I think all of us on the podcast today, on the webinar, we've all been through a few economic cycles up and down. We have a sense of things, but Ellen, what would you say first, and then Haiti, you?
Yeah, I'm really optimistic, actually. I think that there's a lot of movement. I think that people are taking the opportunity to look at the landscape and are being strategic about where they want compliance to grow and focus. I see a lot of folks doing really interesting things and expanding in some ways, retracting in others, but also really much more alignment with strategy and achieving goals. So I'm with that group that says, it's looking pretty good.
I like it.
Thank you. Yeah, Ellen, I 100% agree with you. It is definitely still a critical function in companies. Obviously, highly regulated companies, of course, but they are more complex. The regulations are more complex, and there are more consumer-focused compliance requirements, as well as a large focus on risks generally. I sit on the board of directors of 2 public companies, and we talk about risks all the time. And I look to the compliance officer to tell me, as a board member, what they are looking at, what they see as a future risk, what they anticipate, and how some of the different rules or changes in our government planning affects our company, or what's going to happen to us because as a result of some of the decisions that are being made nationally. So I absolutely think it's still a very critical function. And, being a compliance officer was always one of my favorite jobs. And I think you're in a great place if you're there today.
I love, Haiti, how you brought up the point about worrying on risks. And when you think about how many risks a large global company has, some of those are from regulation. Some of them are more just general operational risks, like, say, cybersecurity. Some are both. Is cybersecurity a regulatory thing? Yes, it is. Is it also just a good business thing? Because if you don't have strong cybersecurity, your company could be in a real mess. Yes, it's both. And so I often tell people, because I know a lot of listeners might be thinking, well, we're deregulating everything. Doesn't that mean it will become less important to have a strong compliance function? I would say no, because think about what a compliance function brings to the business: an ability to understand what your risks are, an ability to get people within the business to talk about the risks and things that might be going wrong so you can respond to that. Show me the future of, say, 2035, where that ability becomes less important. And the company will not care that it doesn't know what employees know or don't know, or it won't care that it's got strong operational risk capabilities. There is no scenario where that becomes less important. So, compliance officers might have to reframe some of what they do to show how it overlaps with strong risk management. But once you start talking about that, a lot of boards would be saying, okay, yeah, that's not going away. Ellen and Haiti, I don't know if you have any thoughts along those lines, but I'd love to just get your sense of why this is still going to be a thing long term, 10 or 15 years from now. We'll still need all of this.
Well, any organization that has humans has risk. It's just that simple. And humans sometimes don't do the right thing or don't know what the right thing is to do, or are incentivized to act in ways that maybe is not in the best interest of the corporation. So risk is not ever going to go away. What it needs to be is identified and managed and mitigated. And as our world gets more complex and we continue to see more interdependencies and interactions between different kinds of topics like cyber and others, I think it's going to be really the core. And corporations that are successful are going to be the ones who understand their risks and focus on them and know how to mitigate them with effective ethics and compliance programs.
All right. Haiti?
Yes, I absolutely agree with that, Ellen. Certainly, as a board member, as I mentioned earlier, we are focused on risk, and we look to opportunities for the company to continue to grow its P&L, to continue to give back to the shareholders, and where can we be most effective in that area? And obviously, understanding how we can mitigate the risks that we have that we're subject to, or the outside forces that are attacking the organization in any way, those are critical to our continued success. So risks will never go away. I think that even individuals who work in the risk arena, who are risk officers, they certainly have a future in organizations these days. There's just no other way to tackle a business without understanding, where you may be vulnerable.
All right. So I also wanted to talk about that. I mentioned it earlier. The eternal question with compliance is, do you need to be a lawyer to be a successful compliance officer? And as you can see, John, this is data I pulled from Barker Gilmore last year. And in fact, this kind of put me on the path to where we are today. I was writing about how clearly some people think you should have a JD because there's a compensation premium if you do. And I don't know how we're even defining what a successful compliance officer is. Is it just successful, you're getting hired and making more money because that's important, or you know what to do? And I know some great compliance officers who do not have JDs. I know some compliance officers with JDs who are, shall we say, not great. Not many, but they're out there. So, John, let me start with you. What about this debate that should you be a lawyer? Is that critical for career success? What are these numbers telling us, do you think, or what do you hear from clients?
Well, it's that, first of all, that is a great question. And second of all, I couldn't agree more is I've placed some great CCOs without JDs, and 10 years later, they're still flourishing at the company. So do you absolutely need to have a JD to be successful? No. Are the companies a little bit have the mindset that the person they want to hire has a JD? I would say yeah. So having a JD is definitely an advantage to get to the table. To get the job, though, it really is how well spoken you are. What is your interface and understanding of the regulators? What is your leadership? All these soft skills that we're talking about. So I think if you're not going to have a JD, it's going to be able to come in and be extremely business minded and being able to understand your business, understand the numbers, understand be able to tell a good story of how you help the business achieve its goals. So yes, the JD will get you access to more interviews, but still just having a JD is not going to land you the job.
Okay. And I do want to ask Ellen and Haiti your takes on this question, but I also wanted to put out, I think polling question number 2 we have for everybody is whether you do, in fact, need a JD to succeed or not. So if we could push out polling question number 2. Yes, okay. On a scale of 1 to 5, how important is it, do you think, to have a JD? And you can go ahead and submit your answers. We'll call up the results in a bit. But, Ellen, I'll ask you first, and then Haiti, give me your thoughts on this. And not just to John's point, if you have a JD, that might help you get the job. Great. Let's say you do have the job. Did you really need to be a lawyer to succeed, or how much does that help? In what ways does it help? In what ways does it not matter? What would you say?
So 2 comments. One is, I think there's always a salary premium on education. So I love your slide, but I would suggest, and maybe you'll prove me wrong, that anybody that has an advanced degree is probably making more than someone who isn't, right?
Mhm.
Whether it's your MBA or something else. So it isn't just that you have to be a lawyer. Maybe if you're an MBA, you would have a salary that's the same, but salary isn't the only indicator of success. I don't think you have to have a JD to be a successful compliance officer. I think what you have to be is a strategic thinker. And a JD may help you be a strategic thinker, just as an MBA might, just as experiences maybe doing auditing or data analytics, or maybe even marketing and communication. The thing about a compliance officer is you've got a lot of different skill sets that you've got to manage in order to be successful. Understanding the law is one of them. It's a critical one, but you don't have to have a JD to do that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and one of the things that I have found is that there's sometimes a mental block within organizations that feel that because I'm in banking, I need someone who understands all the banking laws there are. If I'm in insurance, all insurance laws or health. And again, that's a misnomer in many areas. Now, sometimes you do have to have people who can interpret legal liabilities and penalties, and maybe that will make management feel that having someone who has a legal degree will give them the more accurate information in their opinion. But again, as far as I'm concerned, is there are many opportunities for individuals without legal degrees in compliance. There's investigations, and there are, and sometimes human resource people handle those. They're auditing. There's, accountants are good compliance people. Anybody who has a risk background, or who can apply strategic, initiatives to business plans. That's very important. And I think you can convince management that you can have a job in compliance without that degree, assuming they have gone past that mental block of the need for someone who understands every law there is, which none of us do.
It's funny. A couple of weeks ago, I had a lawyer call me up on this issue because I've written about it. And he said, okay, so you can't use my name, but I am a lawyer who is in compliance, and I want to talk about why it does help. And he had said, it really depends more on the type of lawyer you are. And for example, if you've been in a law firm for years and years, and you suddenly come into the corporate world with no corporate experience, like that could be really bad. You don't know how to navigate a corporation. Or if he spent some time as a litigator, and he said he was struck by how often HR in particular would invite him, then the compliance officer, like, we need to be in the meeting together to tell the corporate legal people they're being unreasonable. And they will listen to you because you've already been a lawyer and you know how to call out their baloney when they say it. And it was issues like that. I'm also struck by a conversation I once had many years ago with a brand new chief compliance officer, and she was not a lawyer. And she said, do I need to be? Well, I don't know. What's your experience? She said she'd been in HR for 12 years and had been a licensed private investigator. And I kind of blurted out, most of what compliance officers are doing is rooting out dumb things human beings have done. So you're fine. That afternoon, in the headlines that day, was a major CEO of a large tech company who had been uncovered fabricating expense reports for dinner with a woman who was not his wife. And just kind of proving the point that for a lot of these misconduct issues, helps to know the law, but if you don't know it, you could call the legal team. They're next door anyways. It's mostly about how do you navigate these tricky situations. Do we have the results of that polling question number 2? Can we put that out there? All right, an almost perfect split between the bottom 4 there. That I don't know what this tells us. We're all over the map here collectively. John, the last question I wanted to ask you was, what about the dual role of a general counsel and chief compliance officer? One person, both titles, see that a lot. Do you think that is a realistic thing? How are we supposed to interpret what that job is about? And then Ellen and Heidi, I'd love to know from you both, can one person do both of those things well, or is that more a cosmetic title and somebody else does compliance? But John, how often do you see these dual roles getting advertised?
We see the dual role advertised often when we're doing a GC search, that the GC will also lead compliance. I would say that the happiest day of a lawyer or a general counsel who has the compliance role is when he gets approval to hire a dedicated chief compliance officer. Because I've never talked to a chief compliance officer that only works half days. So it's a full-time job. The problem is, the issue is, if there's lack of trust that the person who's leading compliance, so there's a person that doesn't have the CCO title, but they're leading compliance, there could be a potential lack of trust. Is, can we place all that liability on that person's head for compliance? Or is the CCO more of the trusted advisor that we want advising at the board level? So, I mean, what I would recommend is, if someone has the head of compliance, but they aren't they don't have the CCO title, it really takes earning that trust of the executive leadership team and the board And a lot of times that Heidi's the best example. She's literally the world's best CCO coach because she's been there and done it and she knows, but sometimes it takes getting perspective from others. What do I really need to do to earn that trust, to earn that title? But I'll just say if a GC CCO gets the authorization to say, let's hire a dedicated CCO, they're thrilled. I mean, they couldn't be happier. They ride as hard to get the search done quickly. So,
Right.
again, with the biggest problem is when you have the combined role is the GCCCO she has to trust people underneath them that don't have the compensation or the title to really do the job that they're not 100% doing.
Well, I mean, that's a really interesting point. And maybe, Heidi, I'll ask it first for you because you are a board director and you've seen this, that the concept that the board or senior management, they want one person that they know they can trust, and they know they can trust the general counsel. And that's not a novel position. It's been around for decades and decades. So why don't we just shoehorn all of this responsibility into this one role and person we know, and then we'll figure it out as the company goes along. That's an interesting perspective. I hadn't quite thought of it that way. But Heidi, what's your take on, how these roles, these consolidated roles, how successful are they, or what do you worry about? What do you think about of them? And then Ellen, I'll ask you for your opinion
Yeah.
too.
So I really feel it's difficult to have both roles on an active, in-depth basis. So if I'm the general counsel, being a compliance officer is a huge job, just as my general counsel position would be. So I feel that it is very difficult to do both. Now, I'm also coming from the perspective of a very large organization, although small organizations have the same concerns. Now, maybe there are general counsels who can do both, but at the same time, they will always have to hire someone as a deputy to help them. It is something that has to be nurtured every day in the compliance function. I also feel it's the responsibility of the general counsel to bring forth that compliance officer to the boardroom, introduce him to the board members, let them know that there is someone besides me as general counsel who is managing the function, who is the one who really understands the in-depth compliance issues and regulations within the organization. So I think it is something that everybody talks about, but sometimes it is just window dressing on the general counsel's part to put their chief compliance officer name attached to it. And I guess maybe ultimately they are the chief compliance officer, if you think about it, if they have the ultimate responsibility. But if, as John said, if you have someone who you trust, who is respected within the organization, who the board respects, and who they will listen to, then it is important to make sure you have someone who is dedicated to that role.
All right. Ellen, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that's spot on. And I think it becomes very dependent on the relationship between the GC and the person in that day-to-day role. If the GC sees the person in the day-to-day role as somebody they have to control, somebody they don't trust, somebody who's competing against them, then it's going to be problematic and it won't serve the organization or the board in their best interests. I have worked for some general counsels who get it. They understand that compliance is different than legal. And, they understand also that it's ethics and compliance, right? Remember, ethics was added to the federal sentencing guidelines in 2004. So it's really ethics and compliance. And they understand how to work out that relationship because there's trust between not only the GC and the compliance officer, but the departments, right? Everybody's working together. The legal department's role is to protect the company from legal risk. So they have to be informed, right? Violations of compliance can represent legal risks. They have to know what's going on. They may have to be in a role where we're doing investigations under attorney-client privilege, right? And the compliance folks have to understand that the need for legal to have that information so that they can manage the legal risks, right? But also compliance is coming from a perspective of building a culture of compliance and preventing and detecting. So depending upon how that relationship is built, it will depend upon how successful it is. But any GC that has just taken the title and is really doing compliance on the side of their desk is not serving the board or the organization.
All right, so I wanted now to shift gears a little bit to some of the softer skills that a candidate should have or cultivate for success in this field. And actually, it's a very nice segue there because, Ellen, you're talking an awful lot about how to cultivate trust with other senior executives you're working with, how to build a culture of compliance, which, in full disclosure, I did not go to law school, but I'm willing to bet Culture of Compliance 101 is not on the curriculum for most law schools. All right. I don't know. Ellen might be challenging me on this.
I teach compliance and culture at Loyola.
All right. Well, so tell me a little bit about this. I'll start with you, Ellen, and then go to Heidi. Both of you, what do you see as the softer skills that are instrumental for success? And we'll get to where do you learn those or where do you pick them up subsequently. But at the moment, what do you need to be able to know how to do?
Yeah. So back to your question about do you need to be a lawyer? And my response is you need to be a strategic leader, right? And I don't think they're soft skills, they're smart skills. One of the things you have to do really in any role is be able to manage polarities, right? In the compliance role, we have to be transparent, but manage confidentiality. We need to be consistent, but also allow for flexibility, right? So you have to be able to be comfortable in working in these kinds of environments. And I think there are 4 skills that you need. And this really comes from Ron Carlucci and a study he did about the 4 things that successful executives do. So it's not just compliance officers, but the first is breadth. You need to understand your organization, right? How does it work? What do people do? Why do they do it? And understand how things come together at the seams, right? The organization is better in the whole rather than its different parts. And you need to figure out how that all works. Context is the other piece. And that's the deep knowledge to understand, well, why do your customers give you money? What do they buy from you? And why do they value it? So how does the organization compete and win? The other is choice. You need to make good decisions. You need to understand really what makes sense and how to stay focused on what is going to achieve the strategy. Sometimes we say yes to everything, and that's not necessarily going to give you success. Because if you aren't focused on what achieves the strategies and the goals, all that other work isn't going to count. And then the last is connection. And that's building those relationships that are built on trust. People want to work for you. They like working for you because you're intentional about building your relationships with them. And they know that you can trust them and they can trust you. And I think those are the skills that will bring success to anyone, whether you're a general counsel or a chief compliance officer.
All right. Heidi, what's your soft skill hit list?
Absolutely, Ellen. I absolutely agree with everything you've said. In my role as a coach with Barker Gilmore, I have found that some of the work I've done with my clients has been related to communication style, leadership abilities, problem solving. Executive presence is a big one. As you continue to grow in your field, in any, or even if it's not compliance, in any organization, having that executive presence makes people take notice. What Ellen said about ability to engage others and build relationships, absolutely. That is also, again, that goes to your executive presence. Ethical decision-making, your interpersonal skills, all of those are things that, I work with clients on. And when you're doing a job every day, you don't focus on that. And, one of the things I always encourage is, look at yourself and assess your own soft skills. What do I have? And you just heard what Ellen said and what I'm saying now. And I think it's important for you each to take that personal assessment and say, where can I grow? What area can I develop so that I can be that next successful compliance officer or compliance professional in general? Again, everybody in management is looking at what you're doing, and it's important that you're focused on these things.
Yeah, I want to one. I just was talking to a really amazing chief compliance officer, and he shared with me that the secret to his success is ability to influence. But as you're saying, from a personal standpoint, it's confident but humble. People like humble people. People that are full of themselves, no one likes them. And the advice he said is the trick in being a really great CCO is changing it from have to want to, right? That probably old school there. But he goes, the trick is teaching people how to go from these are my policies, you have to do them. Feel like a little kid. Why do I have to do this? Because I said so. Versus you making you want to do it. And that's the real trick. And so then I asked another chief compliance officer I was speaking to, I said, hey, someone just was telling me you need to change people's mindset from have to want to. I go, how do you do that? One CCO said, well, you show them the monetary return for doing it the right way. Like what's in it for them? And I thought, that's pretty good, but most of the money we know goes to the CEO and the shareholders and stuff. So that's probably not the right thing. But then the next person I asked, she said, actually a woman said to me, it's all about making sure they understand that we're looking to build this culture and this brand and this reputation that keeps us in business and profitable for the long haul. And that protects your job security, it protects your income, it protects long-term wealth. So there's a lot of different areas, but I think, again, you guys are the coaches, but it's getting people, I thought that was just dynamic, getting people to want to versus these are the policies you have to. So
it often strikes me that you could very easily tie a strong ethics and compliance program to business success. We are very aware of how things might be going wrong or how they could go wrong. And by giving us the right tools, we can help the company not do those wrong things. Therefore, it will be easier for us to do the right things. And right is just morally right, legally right, but just business right. I mean, what business wants to get mired down in a dysfunctional culture where people are sniping at each other or they don't care to speak up about fraud they're seeing, stuff like that? I mean, but John, I guess my question to you would be, everybody understands that soft skills are important. What does that actually look like in the hiring process? I mean, would a company come to you and say, we need someone with the soft skills of 7 on a scale of 1 to 10, or, here's our soft skills criteria. Please make sure they tick off 4 out of 5 bullets. How do they quantify this in a hiring?
well, that's a good question. It really comes into, you meet someone and you just go, wow, that person's amazing. They said it in a way that they didn't come across cocky or lack of humility, and that's what you need to practice. And again, one of my interview tips is always, instead of saying I think I'm the best at this, is say, well, let me share with you what the head of the audit committee recently told me. So you're talking about your reputation with people versus what you think, your identity. So the soft skills are hard to measure. That's where I think Haiti and the coaches are the most valuable out there, because a lot of times people overestimate their EQ and the coaches help bring them down to reality or point out areas for improvement. So it really is, take an EQ test. I would say to anyone, the EQ tests don't lie. Either you are empathetic and you are a good relationship builder and you are the kind of person that listens well to others, or you're not. And I would just say the person who gets to the finish line is the one who is just very, very genuine, very natural. They're not trying to do that. They just are that. So a lot of it's chemistry, but a lot of it really is having the self-awareness to know, am I engaging these people or not? And what I always laugh as a recruiter, I've been doing this more than 30 years. People call me after an interview and they say, that was the best interview I ever had in my entire life. I'm 100% certain they're going to call me back. Usually my phone rings 10 minutes later and it's client saying, oh my gosh, that person was awful. And most times it was because they never stopped talking through the whole interview. So, you know, going in and having a good natural conversation and really gelling with someone, with the people that you meet, that's when you know it's going well. And by the way, people that call me and say, gosh, I don't know how that interview went, it seemed really rough. Those are usually the better ones because they're challenging you more than you think, because they want to see what you're made of and how you stand up to those tough questions. When all the questions are easy, they're trying to get rid of you.
You know, a related issue that I have, not necessarily soft skills, but I'm also thinking just skills generally. How much is this job becoming more tech centric? That compliance officers really need to think in terms of data management, not necessarily that you can code, although we did have one person already write in a question, do we need to know how to code? But, you know, you need to be able to understand how IT systems work, how business processes work, how would a good internal control fit, and you know who's going to design that. And that's another thing that I don't know that they teach that at Chief Compliance Officer School. Although, Ellen, since you are a professor at a Chief Compliance Officer School, you know, let me get your thoughts on it first, and then Haiti as well. Some of these more, I guess, technical skills, for lack of a better word, or IT tech awareness, how much is that becoming a more important part of the job?
So I think it depends upon the organization, and it also depends on whether there has been some real thought as to the mandate of compliance. It is not unusual for compliance officers to kind of be like Mikey from the Life cereal commercial, right? Give it to Mikey, he'll eat anything. Or sometimes some colleagues say, you know, does compliance validate parking? Right? It's scope creep sometimes. So certainly what I've been seeing a lot of folks do is go back to their ethics and compliance charter to make sure that it's clear about what is the ethics and compliance operation responsibility. What is it that they do, like conflicts of interest or anti-bribery screening or those things? And what is it where they provide oversight? And I'm seeing a lot more clients integrate the 3 lines of defense to make it clear what's management's role is the first line, what's compliance's role is the second, and what's audits is the third, to have some clarity around that. But that being said, it is that you have to understand the organization. Why do you need to know these different kinds of skills or understand how these processes work? Because if they bring in money in the door, they're about the company's strategy, right? So I think one of the things that is the most fulfilling about being in ethics and compliance is you're always learning. You're always learning. Things are always changing. Risks profiles change, registries change, the environment that we work in changes, our corporate strategy changes, right? All of those things. So you always have to keep up with them. The one thing that I think kind of brings together, well, I need to know all these different things and how they work, and the role of creating a culture and being an ethics and compliance person is you're focused on choice architecture. You're focused on getting the right kind of behavior. And when you understand the data and the process and how people can make the right choice in the easiest, most time efficient way possible, you will be successful.
Yes.
Haiti, what do you say to that?
I agree. And certainly, as Ellen said, you really do have to be a student of the business. You have to know that business. If you're a siloed compliance officer who only focuses on the compliance issues, you will not be successful. You also have to understand how your data management, your privacy initiatives, all those other initiatives within the organization, how do they affect the bottom line? How do they affect the organization? And that is part of your job. And I think it becomes even more critical today. And you were asking Matt, is it something that is it more important these days than the other part of compliance? I think it is. I think it's only going to continue to get more and more complex. Both of these areas are complex. Companies are dealing with a lot of different issues, be it data management, be it IA, all of those, AI, I'm sorry. Internal audit, though, does have a function. And all of those obviously are concerns or things that are top of mind. And certainly in order to continue to be successful, you have to be able to manage all of that. And those two areas are going to continue to grow.
All right. I just want to shout out some of the comments and questions we've been getting from readers so far here. Somebody here saying to, I think, your points, both Ellen and Haiti, compliance needs to be the trusted advisor, not the police. Well, that goes to you help the business manage the risks. They decide what the risk is going to be. And if they are hell-bent on expanding into that highly corrupt country or moving to an outsourced sales model, that's okay. That's what they get to do, but not the police, which is just regulatory compliance. Did we tick the right box? It's more than that. Somebody else here saying, as we were talking before, do you need to be a lawyer? This person writing in, I have business process auditing, human change management, and IT expertise as a registered pharmacist. Which I wouldn't necessarily have thought about that, but as soon as they said it, yes, that does make a lot of sense. And they were just talking about compliance in the life sciences field. Somebody else writing in, thank you, Ellen, for acknowledging that this is a culture and ethics blended goal. Today, mindset and culture is all the rage on how to make transformation. I will put the questions aside now for a moment, because on that point, I also wanted to talk a bit about what are the experiences that you should try to be racking up in your career to make sure that you do have a good, versatile career path in front of you. So let me ask, I'll start with Haiti and then Ellen and then John. What would you think are good experiences, whether that is building the first compliance program, handling international issues, handling a merger, handling a regulatory infraction? I don't know, but what are those things that maybe you've done in your past, or you've seen others, like that's a really good notch to have on your belt? What would you say, Haiti?
Well, I like well-rounded people. I think, as Ellen said, I like people who have had a lot of experiences in different areas. And I had international experience, which was invaluable at McDonald's Corporation, which 100 companies or so. So that was definitely an experience that was needed and a skill that was not matched by too many other people in the organization. Risk management, if you're in the risk management field, that is not going away. I don't know of a company where that will ever be something everyone says, well, let's just put the risks aside on everything we're doing here. Auditing roles, I think if you're in the accounting, auditing, investigations area, you also have some great skills for being in the compliance officer role. If you want to continue to network with other compliance professionals, that may be an area for you to be able to expand your breadth. So having additional skills is always a plus. And even what Ellen was saying, she's teaching it, being someone who's out there, who's learning from others on what is important for them in the field. I think that's important as well. So Ellen?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I think is really important as you think about your career is to understand what you want, right? You don't really want to just go gather experiences and skills in a kind of haphazard way. What do you want? Is your goal to be a chief? But a chief of what? What kind of company? Where is your interest? Where is your passion? And so one exercise I used to have my staff do was write their resume 5 years from now and then go backwards. Well, what's going to help you get there? Sometimes people become very frustrated because they have 20 certificates and they've been in multiple organizations, but they don't know how to bring that all together to represent to a future employer why that's valuable. So what do you really want? What kind of organization do you really want to work for, and what would they need? I think that's a practical way to approach it. And I think everybody's path is going to be a bit different because we don't have this standard. This is what a compliance officer looks like. I don't know if you've seen some of these people with the they make themselves a doll, and you've got the
Yep.
costume and the little. It doesn't exist for the compliance officer because we're so diverse and we're so different, and we bring so many different kinds of experiences and expertise to the industry. And I hope we always stay that way and we don't become blended into some kind of standard where we fit into, here's the uniform, here's the absolute profile that everybody has to have.
And you know, and just to hook on that, someone with a communications degree, I mean, that is very critical in compliance. Being able to communicate across, you know, all departments, all the hierarchy, but also to all of your constituents. So even someone with a communications degree would be an excellent choice for someone in a compliance role.
All right. Well, first, Haiti, I was a communications major, so for that shout out, I will give you all the easy questions for the rest. But John, give me your take. Number one, I would love to know, what do you think are some good critical career experiences that would propel a candidate to the top of the pile? But before we get there, John, I was really struck when Ellen said, understand what you want. How often is it that you encounter candidates who don't quite know what they want? And I'm wondering, is that an open question for some people?
Yeah, that is actually a great question. I think even a better question is, like, some people think they want to be a CCO. Why do you want to be a CCO? And do you have it in your DNA to be a CCO? So I think most people have a good understanding or their desire to be a CCO. I think the real question is, why do you want to be a CCO, and why do you feel you're qualified to be a CCO? I look at CCOs as being this 360. So there's two components. There's the business and there's the corporate structure.
Yep.
And the CCO needs to have it all. I was just speaking to a CCO that I thought was great. Happy to present to one of my clients, but one of the businesses that this company owned was parking lots. They do valet parking to clubs during the weekends, right? That was one of their businesses. So why I enjoyed hearing that he took a week and went to this club, this location, one of their bigger, hotter locations, and worked as a parking lot attendant for the week to understand what the heck they're all about. Now, this is, terrific lawyer with great credentials and experience that's moved into compliance. And I gave him a lot of credit for going and really, like Ellen and Haiti are talking over and over about learning the business. Go work in the business to learn the business. But maybe you'll spot or identify issues that were overlooked at the higher level. And so if you're fighting for that CCO role, maybe raise your hand and go work in the business a little bit to give you the opportunity to identify issues, bring to the attention, gain respect from that leadership team that gets you into maybe an audit committee meeting, or hopefully maybe ultimately a board meeting. Maybe there's an internal investigation, you can raise your hand and take it, that gets the visibility at the top. So if someone's aspiring to be a CCO, as these great women have said, you need to learn the business. My recommendation is work in the business to learn the business. Yes, it's volunteering and some travel, but you'll gain the respect because you're going to show how humble you are to roll up your sleeves and do some of these things. But it might also bring to your attention some issues that others have overlooked that then you can bring to the higher level, gain their trust and respect, resolve those issues, and turn into a rock star. So there's a lot going on there, but it's the business and the corporate, and you need it all.
John, let me stick with you for the next question here. What about the idea of moving among multiple industries, or sticking with your industry? That can be easier said than done to move around. Sometimes you might get pigeonholed in only financial or only healthcare. Then again, those are some mighty big pigeonholes. But how should people think through the industries they stick to or move around?
I knew you were going to ask that question, so I asked a couple of great CCOs that exact question. And the one thing they said to me was, you're only going to succeed if you ultimately enjoy the business that you're working in. So if you're passionate, so people will say, well, boy, people from financial services and healthcare seem to be making a little bit more money than I'm making in say retail or whatever. Okay. Do you enjoy, do you speak that language of financial services or insurance or what healthcare provider or payer or whatever it is? You really need to know. So I do like if someone's had multiple experiences, people do enjoy that. It shows you're intellectually curious. It shows you're capable of learning. It does broaden your portfolio and your resume, but you're only going to be successful if you're really doing something you like. The good news about compliance, everyone needs a CCO, no matter what the industry. If you're into fashion or you're into finances or you're into healthcare, pick what you really like and be passionate about it, and you'll be successful.
All right. Ellen and then Haiti, what would you also say about either how easy it is to move around industries or how wise it would be or not wise to be? Like, what would you think of that?
Well, I've been in many different industries, so I'm going to say that I think it's wise. I hope it's wise. I think it shows breadth. And as John said, it shows that intellectual curiosity, but it also, in a very tangible way, shows you can learn, right? If you can succeed in a large health insurance company and then go to a food service company and then go to the world's largest non-for-profit and then move to consulting, guess what? You have those soft skills that apply to all of those industries, right? I mean, you're taking with you not only the technical knowledge that you've learned about the industry, but also your skills, and you're building on them. And what you've done is you've taken the risk to go into a new industry to see if you could be successful. You bet on yourself. You bet on yourself. And I think that's important because we all need to keep having challenges and to grow. But I think it also just demonstrates that you're willing to put in the work and the time to succeed elsewhere with the skills that you have and continue to build. So I don't think that there's, just like there isn't the model CCO, there isn't a model career path that you have to have healthcare and finance, or you have to have this or this. And to John's point, have a passion and an interest in what you're doing instead of just doing time.
Again, yes, if you're happy with the industry, you should stay there. But more importantly, I really do feel it's important for you to build a deep knowledge of an industry. I think it's extremely valuable. You're more valuable to that industry. Let's put it that way. You might not be happy with the company you're with, but maybe you can transfer. But with that deep knowledge, you will be able to transfer to a similar organization. So I think there is no substitution for that deep knowledge. But then there are some highly transferable skills, and I think we've talked about those. The ability to communicate, the ability to understand certain areas that are common to all, such as privacy, IT security, some of those areas that every company is concerned about, risk management. And so if you have those and you want to get out of the niche you're in, that's what you have to focus on those highly transferable asset base you bring, that highly transferable asset base you bring to the new organization. Again, there are some people who say, if you don't know every law in banking, we don't want you. If you don't know every law in health, we don't want you. And that could be, but a highly skilled individual who can get into an interview and then convince someone that you can get that. No one will ever know all the laws, but I bring A, B, C, and D instead, or plus.
Yeah, that's a great point, Haiti, too, is that you just have to realize and appreciate some people are fixated. If you don't have the exact experience in our industry, we just did a search for a company, they're fixed income shop in New York. If you don't have fixed income compliance experience, you can't do this job. Now, is that silly? Hopefully the CEO is not watching. Yes, it's silly, but I can't change that mindset. So you just have to be understanding that some people are going to have that mindset. Some people are more open to the charisma, the influence, what you've done to help build compliance and how you lead and motivate, inspire others. You just have to be persistent. It's not like, let me apply to 3 jobs and one of them I'll decide which one I want to take. You really need to cast a wide net in compliance.
I wanted to get back a bit to the idea of whether or not you need a JD and more about whether or not you need certain types of non-compliance experience to avoid getting pigeonholed as only compliance. And an example of what I mean is I know a person who had spent a long career in compliance. She did have a law degree, however, lost her job in a RIF. That is not uncommon. But there were lots of companies now who would say, well, you're only compliance, so therefore we're never going to consider you for a corporate legal role, even though I think she would have been open to that. Or if you don't have a JD, but people might say, well, you're only compliance, so I'd never consider you for an HR role or an internal audit role. And I don't know what that risk is, that you might get pigeonholed as only compliance. And if there is some way that you wind up in a career dead end or you get left by the curb. John, let me ask for you first. Is that a real phenomena? Am I articulating something that could happen? And then Ellen and Haiti, I'd love your thoughts about kind of getting outside compliance, non-compliance experience. But John, what about this issue?
I guess I have to point to, we watch people move around in different positions regularly. So it's the person, if you're able to connect with people and show that you have aspirations to do more. One of my favorite interview questions, and I hate to keep pointing to my interview questions, but the interviews are critically important. One of my favorite interview questions is, how have your responsibilities progressed since you took that position? You started with this company in 2018. What were your responsibilities? What have evolved? If you really want to make it out there in corporate America, you need to show that you have earned the trust of others, and because of that, they've given you more responsibility. So I think the bigger question you say, if you tell me on that, and when I'm interviewing, well, I'm doing the same thing I did 10 years ago, that's a problem. So, again, you're asking, is it capable? Anything's possible. I watch people do all kinds of things, taking on different responsibilities, but it really takes that desire and proactively seeking it out to make it happen. You want to build it so when you're ready, when you're interviewing me or anyone else out there, and CHROs love to ask that question as well, but have a resume showing that you consistently taken on greater responsibilities, no matter what it is. I don't care if it's going to the business side and taking a human resource role or whatever it is. It's just showing that you've done more than doing the same job for 10 years is critically important.
Ellen and then Haiti, let me ask you both. This idea of getting pigeonholed as only compliance, is that a thing, do you think, a fear? And if it is, how would you avoid it? But Ellen, what would you say to those questions?
Well, I think every organization has exactly the kind of compliance program it wants. And some of them clearly are very, very narrow and very, very focused on regulatory compliance only. And others think of compliance as ethics and compliance and about their culture and have a very different viewpoint. So those that want to put compliance in a box and it means X might not be where you want to work. I think the thing that you have to really think about is where your skills fit and what you want to do, right? So the employer that says, well, you're just compliance, so that's not good enough, maybe isn't also the employer that gives people in those roles the opportunity to expand. I think any chance you have, whether with your CFO, your chief human resources officer, your chief marketing officer, whoever it is, any chance that you have to work on a cross-functional initiative or a project, any chance you have to help other people meet their goals while you're also meeting yours, take it. Because all that does is help you learn the business, but also understand where people with those kinds of disciplines and experience are coming from. And when you get their point of view, you have the ability to have more influence and more persuasion. And instead of working against each other, you're working together. So I think, take every experience you can, as long as it's getting you to where you want to go.
All right.
I agree. And also, when it comes to being pigeonholed in compliance, I think compliance is a broader is a broader role. And I think that's what you have to focus on. Talk about your track record of collaboration, how you influence others. All of those are very important aspects that people look for when they want to hire someone. What other attribute might you have? I communicate well. I have handled difficult situations. Again, a compliance officer does it, but that is a very important role in any job you may want to pursue in the future. How you handle difficult people. Again, what kind of a leader are you? So focusing on all those other important attributes you have besides compliance could convince someone that, yes, I have compliance. And by the way, that's the plus. Here are the great things I have from a personal standpoint. And then you're getting a wonderful compliance officer.
All right. And now we do have a whole bunch of questions from listeners, and I'm going to get to those in a moment. But John, I just wanted to sneak in one more credential and experience question to you. How important or how useful do you think it is for a candidate to have these more continuing education sort of certifications? There is the CCEP, there is the CHC, I think it is. There's various ones for healthcare, for finance, for general ethics and compliance. Do those help?
They definitely, yeah, and CIPP for privacy, obviously. I would just, again, as everyone's talking, the broader your portfolio of certifications or experience, the better. All of those things are great, again, for getting you to the table for interview. You still have to pull off the perfect interview. So, you talk about how gifted these people are, that they're so technically minded, they're so business minded, they're so regulatory minded, all that stuff in a package. But the cherry on top is that personality and ability to influence. I just can't stress it enough. So it really is something that the good news is your EQ is something that you can work on. So if your EQ needs a little bit of an adjustment to become a better people person, it's something a great coach can help you fix easily, or even just reading the right books and doing self-learning yourself. But all of those credentials, again, everything is helpful. But if you miss that cherry on top, which is those soft skills, you're not getting the job.
And I should say, if we could push out polling question number 3, which I think is, do you have one of these certifications or not? If we could push that out to the listeners, that would be great. I also wanted to shift. Okay. Let me refine it. If you could start over, would you pursue a career in compliance? Yes or no? I should have struck out the not sure and made everybody commit to one firm decision. So we will take 20 seconds or so to process that data and then push out the results. But I did want to move to some of the user questions, the listener questions. One that actually, Ellen, I think I'll put this to you first. What are some actionable steps to better develop and prepare junior and mid-level staff for succession purposes? And I know that's something you were thinking about when you ran compliance at AARP for a while. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I would go back to, build your resume, right, for 5 years from now, right? Because there has to be a match, not only with the skills and the talents and what that person can bring in a succeeding role, but do they want it?
Yeah.
Right? Do they want it? Sometimes you have well-placed professionals and they don't want it, right? So it is not just, do you want to be promoted? Do you want to be the successor? But is that the right fit for you? I think it's a terribly important thing, and a lot of people don't spend time on it. You as their manager, you should be doing that. You should be helping your people grow in any way that is beneficial to them and the organization. So one of the things that I think is always really important is helping them build their network, right? The saying is that your network is your net wealth. And people learn from we learn from each other all the time. It's what we're doing right now. But seeing other people in different roles and what they do and how they succeeded can be extremely valuable. Giving them opportunities. I think one of the things sometimes we don't do as leaders is give other people the chance, right? If you turn down a speaking engagement, don't say, no, I can't do it. Say, my colleague would be happy to take my place, right? Look for and think about how you can promote your staff when they're not in the room, right?
Mhm.
When you're in a meeting and you're presenting and, you can say, Matt was instrumental in helping put this report together, right? Because what you're saying to the other folks is, this is somebody you can trust because I trust them, right? And giving credit where credit is due, I think, is incredibly important. And then always staying in touch with folks on what interests them, what do they want to learn, where do they want to go. And sometimes people leave your organization, and that's okay.
Mhm.
That's okay.
Here is another question. How do you think AI might play a role in the future of compliance managers? Will we need to obtain AI certifications? And somebody else was asking, will AI make compliance duties go away? Haiti, I'll put that one to you. I don't know that you're the AI expert, but I'm going to christen you
That's
that.
okay. That's okay. I've been reading a lot about that subject itself, and certainly, I don't think it's going to get rid of compliance officers, but I think it's going to help in some areas. It's going to help by analyzing some of that, over-consuming data, and maybe helping with the risk assessments. Maybe also assisting in monitoring and interpreting regulatory changes that are coming forth. So it could be a tool for the future. It can help policy management. And that's one area that talking to one of the compliance officers that I coach, they've been finding it to be very helpful in that area. So it's a tool, and I think it's something that compliance officers should embrace. As we all know, it's not going to go away. So how can you better make it a part of what you are doing at your organization and your compliance program to help improve efficiencies? And I think that's where it's going to be the more helpful area for us.
I would only say I've written about AI a fair bit too. And somebody recently said, well, is AI going to replace the chief compliance officer? So play that out. Yeah. And I'll ask you about that, John, too. But the AI is not going to what? Then they're going to report to the general counsel? Are they going to start telling the business units what vendors you can or can't use or anything like that? That's not it. And I
Yeah.
know people would say, well, that's not what we meant. We meant, would AI let somebody else do the compliance duties? I mean, maybe, but really, then you're going to have an awful lot of stuff falling through the cracks because everybody's going to be thinking everybody else is using AI to answer the compliance risks, and they're going to miss something. AI is going to be a tool, just like spreadsheets were a tool.
Mm-hmm.
And, how many accountants worried in 1980 that spreadsheets would leave them unemployed? And we have more accountants than ever before, and we don't have enough of them. So I think it would be a lot like that. All right, so here's some nice feedback. If you could start over, would you still stay in compliance? 73% said yes. But John, I don't know if you have any thoughts in particular about, is AI going to replace the compliance officer? What would you say?
Well, obviously, everything I'm suggesting says no because it's all these soft skills, and obviously AI is never bringing the soft skills that we're talking about today. So the answer, obviously, clearly no. Can it make the compliance program more efficient with fewer people? I totally believe auditing, testing, training could be done with AI. That said, I had to call my lawn care company the other day, and I thought I was talking to a human being, but I was talking to an AI service to take my appointment or to get to schedule an appointment. And I literally, I was gonna, is this a person or not a person? I was almost offended when it wasn't a real person because you're like, you couldn't ask any other questions or get any other information. So you kind of hung up unfulfilled from the call. So I definitely think the people touch makes the difference. And that compliance is all about the people touch, the human touch. So
And I mean, I would just add, if AI will let you do more with less, the company's not going to let you do less. The company's going to give you more.
you're
Come
gonna
on.
do more. Yeah, the job's gonna get bigger.
I mean, some things do not change. Ellen, here's another question that maybe I will throw to you. I run global compliance at my company. My firm still talks about big C compliance versus little c compliance as if these are actual concepts. Nobody can define what they mean by either term. Help? So Ellen, I don't know. Could you help him on
Well-
what you think that means?
So I went to look it up before we got online, and it talked about creativity rather than compliance. But I'm assuming big C is follow the regs, and little c is culture. And I think they should be reversed, right? Because following the law is just it's the floor. We all need to do it. It applies to all of us. That's just, that's table stakes for being in business. Ethics and having a culture of compliance is the ceiling, right? That's where you want to go. So they should be reversed. But from a practical perspective on the help question is go back to your ethics and compliance charter, right? I mean, what has the organization said they expect the compliance department to do in running the compliance program? What's your scope? What's your remit? And if that is out of balance, then maybe now it's time to have the conversation with the charter as the vehicle. Because if what you've got is a real kind of disconnect between what the people, your stakeholders think you should be doing or the department should be doing and what you're doing, that will not get better over time, right?
Yeah.
Because what you're doing is you're conflicting. So you've got to get it out there. You've got to talk about it in a way that meets the needs of everyone. And you've got to think about, well, why do they see it that way? What's behind that? Is there some fear about trust, right? And control of compliance? Is it maybe just a lack of understanding? Sometimes it's just a lack of understanding. They don't know it as well as you do. And so take that opportunity to teach and build that relationship. But you're not alone. Other people have had that problem, that other people will have that problem in the future. And I think it's up to you to kind of really foster and have the conversations so that you get to common ground about, well, what is compliance's role? What are their responsibilities?
Okay. Here's another question. Maybe, Haiti, I'll put this to you first. On the importance of a title, does it really matter if the offer is for a chief compliance officer or a chief ethics and compliance officer? And Haiti, I'll ask you first, because I know if I ask Ellen, she's going to get up on her soapbox about how important.
Is it important? Well, I think if it's chief ethics and compliance officer, that signals to me that the organization has thought about how there is an important interconnection between the two, and that they view ethics as an important value within the organization. And so to me, I like that. I like that they're calling it ethics and compliance. I think there's a signal there. When it's chief compliance officer, sometimes the mindset could be, we just want someone who's going to make sure that we're okay with all these regulations, and that's really all we want. Someone who is an ethics and compliance officer and that the organization recognizes as such is someone who is being given the latitude and the opportunity to affect change both in culture and in compliance in the organization. So, I guess I advocate for both. I think once you get in there as chief compliance officer, you certainly can advocate for adding ethics to the title. And there's a lot of host of reasons why that would be important to do.
All right. And Ellen, if you would like to get on the soapbox on this issue, I would welcome your thoughts. And then
I'm on the soapbox, but Haiti said it well, so.
all right. John, do you actually see a steady stream of ethics and compliance officer roles, like that is the title, or is that?
No, the main title we see is CCO, and the rarity is the CISO. So, and I hate to interrupt, but we are in the point of having to wind down. So I guess if you have any final questions, I know I would just, if I hate to jump over the top of you, Matt, but it's my low EQ kicking in.
Go right ahead.
The two bits of advice I would recommend to anyone before they go in and talk to a company about a CCO opportunity. One, do your research, know the reputation of the company before you go in. If the company, and that means, what's the reputation with customers, what's the reputation with regulators, look into their proxy, look into the litigation that they have, walk in there being prepared, know what you're up against walking in the door. The number two is you really need to understand what is the reputation of the compliance department. So today I'm actually filling a CCO role with the Fortune 500. The CCO is retiring after all these years, wants to go to Florida and play golf, which is great. He's built an amazing program and the company feels it's an amazing program and they don't need a change agent to come in and change it. That would be great to know. So if you're using a headhunter like me, obviously I know, and I will tell you walking in the door, but if you're going in with just cold, having a conversation, get a grip on what is the reputation of the compliance program before you start talking about what you're going to do. So again, does the company need a change agent? Is the company happy? What is the reputation of compliance with the business? What's the reputation of compliance with the board and the ELT? And as far as the compliance program, what are you looking for? Are you looking for someone to come in and take the compliance program to the next level? Or are you looking for someone to do radical change, using Matt's word? Or are you looking for someone who's really going to keep an eye on what's coming out in the industry and making sure we stay on top of it? So again, do your homework, know the reputation, and two, understand what is the reputation of the law department once you're interviewing, before you start speaking on what you're going to do next.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was just going to ask maybe Ellen and Haiti, if you both want to take a minute of a final thought. I'll just ask you, what is your long-term prognosis for the compliance field as a profession? I know we touched on that at the beginning an hour and a half ago. Wrap it up for me again. Like, how bullish are you on the need for these sort of things? Ellen first, and then Haiti, and then we can wrap up.
Oh, I'm very bullish. I mean, I think for all the reasons we've discussed and also all the talent that's out there, risk isn't going to go away. In fact, I think it's going to amplify and accelerate as we become much more technically dependent, as our global economies change, as the world continues to be a different place, sometimes each and every day. I think it is an incredibly fulfilling and satisfying career, if that's something that you want to do. And if you're interested in things that always change and learning new things and building new relationships, I think it's a great profession to have.
All right.
I'm bullish as well, and I was very pleased to see the percentage of individuals who are happy with their role, because I really did enjoy my my time as a chief compliance officer. But the reason I'm bullish also is because I think that more and more boards are going to recognize the importance of this role. As a board member, I certainly do respect and appreciate the impact that our compliance officers have in the organization. And I think that's an important area that you should focus on, making sure you're showing that impact in your organization. But I'm bullish. I think it's a great career, and I don't think it's going away.
All right. Well, in that case, we will wrap it up here. But Ellen Hunt, Haley Olinger, thank you both very much for your time. John, thank you for Barker Gilmore putting this on. And thank you, everybody who's joined us today. This has been a great conversation.
Definitely. Great job, Matt. Thank you.
All right.
Well, hopefully we'll see others next month when we're talking about the general counsel, but feel free to reach out to us anytime if you're looking for opportunity, looking for a coach, or looking to make a strategic hire on your team. We're happy to give you some candid advice. So great. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.